morning, everyone. So, thanks, Stephen and Gary, for lining things up for me. My name is Stefan Magneron from HomeSol Building Solutions. I'm an energy advisor. I've been fortunate enough to have been on this journey with Stephen and the team at Land Ark Homes to make their community a net zero ready community. I'm a proud member of CASE, which is the Canadian Association of Consulting Energy Advisors, quite the mouthful, which is why shortening it to CASE is appropriate. And I help builders and renovators and homeowners achieve programs like EnerGuide, Energy Star, R2000, Net Zero, and we've also been involved with a few passive house projects, either with Fierce or the international passive house standard. Absolutely. A lot of studies have been made to suggest that the crisis that we have right now is that buildings consume a lot of carbon, a lot of embodied carbon, both in its construction process but also in its operation, and it accounts for about 39% of carbon, and a good chunk of that is the burning of fossil fuels. So 82% of carbon is coming from heating these homes or buildings or generating the electricity for them. The Canadian government has recognized this, and so they've developed the net zero standard, and certainly working towards net zero as the 2030 goal. So what Land Ark Homes is achieving now is future-proofing homes in this community by reaching that standard now. In addition to that, the 2050 goal is that all buildings will be net zero ready. So that's quite the target to be setting. So that means that every building that's here, which is essentially accounts for about 60% of the building stock, is already here. They will need to get retrofitted to meet these standards. So here's a nice image that essentially says how we can make this happen. Passive house is one strategy, although it's just a flavor of deep energy retrofits. Using low embodied carbon materials is another component of it, which, as Gary mentioned, that could be hours worth of discussions to speak about that. Electrifying everything is a key part of this climate action, and also using that clean energy. So as Gary mentioned, if your electricity is produced by coal or natural gas or other fossil fuel sources, then it's not exactly the best way forward. So changing the source is going to be critical, and Chris is going to be talking about adding renewables on there, which is going to be a key part of it. Something that isn't part of this particular climate action image is the idea of walkable neighborhoods, which what Westport is, and the community here is developing this sort of walkable community. And Stephen Ralston mentioned a lot about European cities and how they've developed over time. And I've heard that it's been said that those types of mixed use communities that are walkable are inherently about 60% more energy efficient than an urban sprawl type community. So that's an important part of this climate action. So speaking of passive house and what you can do with the house itself, here are the passive house principles that help buildings achieve that level of energy reduction. So we've got things like continuous insulation, thermal bridge-free design, an airtight envelope that Gary can certainly help everyone achieve, high-performance windows, management of the solar energy, not only with the windows, but with exterior shading devices. And then we have a fresh air machine with heat recovery, also known as a HRV or ERV. And essentially, to put this into context, it's Gary said that it's like putting a sweater on the house. It could also be considered putting a Gore-Tex jacket on the house. There are a lot of similarities between a Gore-Tex jacket and a high-performance home. You put on a Gore-Tex jacket because you're trying to reduce the amount of heat that your body needs to generate to stay warm. So same thing with putting insulation on the house, making it airtight. So you've got all this technology in a Gore-Tex jacket where it's protecting you from the elements, it's stopping you from getting wet, it's controlling heat, air, and moisture, which are also building science principles, and all the time keeping you comfortable. So the same thing happens when you retrofit a house with building science in mind. You're allowing the house to have drying potential, but you're also keeping it airtight and well insulated. So when we renovate a house with comfort and durability in mind, here are some of the elements that you want to take into consideration. These numbers are guides, so if anyone is a cook or a baker, this is more like a recipe that you can be a little bit carefree with. It's not like you're baking something where you have to be exact. So keep that in mind as we go through this. These graphs will also highlight the benefits, the quantifiable benefits of these upgrades based on heat loss, which is something that we can quantify and put a number to, but really the goal of all of these measures is to make your house more comfortable and more durable. So air tightness is one of them. Gary mentioned that the net zero target is 1.5 ACH. Really the goal is 0. You want to get that house as tight as possible, but at the same time you want to ventilate it right, which is where the fresh air machine comes in, and that's why we recommend installing an ERV, and that goes hand in hand. So you want to build it tight, but you want to ventilate it right. And the reason why we oftentimes recommend an ERV over a HRV is because of that moisture transfer. So it does the same thing where it brings in fresh air, it exhausts stale air, and it exchanges some of the heat so that you don't have that penalty of having to reheat the house for the benefit of fresh air. But it also transfers some of the moisture. So in our climate, it's cold and dry in the winter, so it helps humidify the air that's coming in, but it's also hot and humid in the summertime. And so for comfort, it shaves off some of that humidity that's coming into the house while it's exhausting the cooler, drier air from the house. So super important that you have that in your mind as you're making your house more airtight. 6 represents the R value of a high performance window. There are other numbers that are more relevant. 6 just makes it nice with the rest of the numbers that are on the chart here, but really we're looking for a window with a U value, which is the inverse of an R value, a U value that's low, and an SHGC, or a solar heat gain coefficient, that is also low. The U value will help the gray bar reduce down to what the yellow bar is. So it's stopping that or reducing that heat transfer through that window, so heat loss. And it's important to get a window with a really low U value from a comfort perspective, because now next to that window in the winter, you'll be more comfortable. Actually, I did a small renovation in my house over COVID, and we put a triple glazed patio door essentially in the front of the house. And this last winter, my wife was standing next to it, and she commented to me. She looked over and she said, I feel comfortable. I feel warm next to this window. And I didn't say anything, but I was just like, yes, this is why we spent the extra money to get that type of window in, because of this comfort that is really difficult to quantify. You have to experience it. The low solar heat gain, that's that solar management that I mentioned. Now, you can do this with exterior devices like overhangs and exterior operable shading devices, but that's not as common. So really you want the window to do the heavy lifting, and using a low solar heat gain will prevent overheating during the shoulder seasons and summertime, and stuff like that. And so obviously as the temperatures are increasing, generally speaking, that's an important part of the equation. 10 and 30 is talking about the basement. So 10 is R10 on the slab, or the floor of the basement, which, in certain situations for a retrofit is difficult to achieve. So you do what you can and put as much as you can without impacting the head height. R30 is for the walls, so if you can put insulation on the walls, if your basement is finished then, and you have to excavate on the outside for some reason, then putting it on the outside is an option as well. But just like with everything, these guidelines are not something that you want to do just for the sake of doing it. I mean, it's if you're in the situation where you can do something and then add the insulation, then that's when you take action. For example, if you're going to be re-siding the house, well, adding insulation to the exterior is the best opportunity to do that. How much insulation you put on, aiming for R40 for the whole wall is optimal, but it depends. It's similar to comparing a car. You could get an electric car like a Nissan Leaf, and it does exactly the same thing as a Tesla as far as getting you from A to B and using electricity. It's just a matter of how much performance you're willing to pay for. So same thing with adding insulation or any parts of these ingredients. It's as long as you do something and you're aware of it, then that's the. Then the final part is the depending on how much insulation you have up there. Trying to achieve R60 is what we typically aim for. It's what code is right now. Really, the key part with adding insulation in the attic is air sealing, because anyone who's ever experienced or have ice damming in their house, air leakage is the key part of why that happens. So sealing it up before you add the insulation is critical. So when you've put on this Gore-Tex jacket around your house, what happens is that your heating and cooling loads drastically get reduced. Now, another way, so heating and cooling loads are essentially the size of the mechanical systems that are required to maintain comfort. So they're almost like the Band-Aid approach to comfort, because really you need to do, you need the thermal enclosure to do the heavy lifting there. But here you can see that the heating load gets cut in half, and the cooling load as well. Another way of looking at this is sort of the passive survivability of a house, and so the lower the loads, the more resilient your house will be during power outages. So as an example, we have some projects that have reached passive house or deep energy retrofits, and during the winter they've tested out their house, turned off the heat during minus 30-degree temperatures overnight, and measured the actual indoor air temperature. Without any heat, these houses barely dropped a degree or two overnight when it's minus 30 out. So from a resilience perspective, adding this Gore-Tex jacket around your house will allow you to weather these storms. Then once you get to that point, we've got the mechanicals. And here we've got, we talked about electrifying everything, and we use something magical. The HP might make you think of Harry Potter as the magician in this story, but it's really heat pumps. So heat pumps for space heating and cooling, and heat pumps for hot water. And once you get to that point and you're electrifying things and you're really reducing the energy consumption for space heating and hot water, now we can think about renewables to offset all those. So in this particular house, we're going from 120 gigajoules per year. The EnerGuide rating is all in gigajoules, and we're dropping it down to, before solar panels get put on, it's about 49 gigajoules, and then the solar panels do the rest of the way. From a greenhouse gas or emissions perspective, we're going from 4.8 tons of CO2, and then before the solar panels get put on, it's below 1. So that's like a 10 times increase in or decrease in the amount of greenhouse gas emissions. Now, another thing that you can do even now is start to measure your energy consumption, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And by measuring it, you can start making those steps to reduce the amount of energy you consume right now, and just being aware of how you operate your house. And that's wrap things up. So that's deep energy retrofit in a nutshell.